Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Extra Literary Affairs podcast. Today, Joey and I will be having an affair with Ling Ma and her short story, Los Angeles, published in the online edition of Granta magazine. Before we discuss the story, let's learn a bit more about this author who was new to me. Ling Ma, a Chinese American novelist and professor at the University of Chicago, was born on May 6, 1983, in Sangming, China. She grew up navigating immigrant life in Utah, Nebraska, and Kansas in the US. She studied at the University of Chicago and also at Cornell University, where she earned her MFA from Cornell. Ma's writing uniquely blends speculative fiction and realism, often exploring the intersection of the fantastical with the mundane everyday life. Influenced by Midwestern writers, her prose combines plain spoken lyricism with deep emotional undertones. In her debut novel, Severance, she offers a critique of late stage capitalism and the Chinese American diaspora, winning the 2018 Kirkus Prize and being listed as a New York Times notable book in 2018. Pretty impressive. Her second book, Bliss Montage, features short stories that blur reality and the surreal, addressing themes of alienation, cultural expectations, and the immigrant experience. It won the National Book Critics Award for Fiction and the Story Prize. Ma's thoughtful and imaginative storytelling creates immersive worlds that resonate deeply with readers. And last but not least, Joey. She also is a MacArthur Genius Award winner. So we're sensing a
Hmm.
theme here. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the background information on Ling Ma?
I don't have any more background information, but I will say that I wanted us to read this story because I had read Bliss Montage, her short story collection, I don't know, a month or two ago or something. And I had never even heard of her. I've seen the book Severance in like bookstores and around, but for whatever, it was just like it's like a plain pink cover. And I was just like, I don't know. Not that I judge books by covers, but this one, for whatever reason, I had just not been appealed to. So ended up reading this, and I loved the entire collection, and I really love this story. I think I love them all equally, but this one stuck out as something I think would be fun for us to discuss. So I highly suggest everyone gets this collection because it's so rare, I feel like, to find an entire short story collection that every story in it is like excellent. I mean, not to say that that's never happened, but for my taste of reading, they're written so widely, like in different genres sometimes. So, but this one, great, start to finish.
Awesome. Thank you, Joey. And I remember when you first pitched this idea to me, you're like, I have a story that I think you are going to love. And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, Joey, let's see." And I'm like, oh, you're so right. I love everything about this story. So why don't I jump into a summary so we're all on the same page here? So the story that we read was called Los Angeles. So the summary is in a sprawling Los Angeles mansion, the narrator lives with her wealthy but emotionally distant husband, their two children, and her 100 ex boyfriends, each occupying the house's decaying east wing. The exes accompany her on surreal, credit card fueled escapades across the city, blurring the past and the present. Among them, Aaron, who is a lost love, and Adam, an abusive ex, linger most vividly. When Aaron abruptly leaves, the narrator begins confronting the ghost of her past, while the husband, reduced to dollar sign murmurs, i.e., like the teacher in Charlie Brown,
Hmm.
withdraws into silence. The story crescendos when police arrive searching for Adam, remember Adam, the abusive ex, triggering a chaotic chase through the hills. As her children and husband pursue Adam, the narrator glimpses her younger self in her old apartment at the El Parisio. She then confronts Adam in the darkness, and we will explore that further. The tale unravels as a fever dream of excess and unresolved trauma where LA's endless sprawl mirrors the narrator's fractured identity. Love, violence, and memories collide in a final sprint toward reckoning or possibly an escape. The house, like her psyche, shrinks as the past refuses to stay buried. So, Joey, that I think was a very factual retelling of the story, but there are so many beautiful elements in it that I'm really looking forward to exploring. So, would you like to give us your initial impressions?
Like I said, I've already read this story. That's where I found it. It's in her collection. So I already knew I was gonna love it. But this one stuck out to me, I think, because I love the idea of we never really can walk away from the people that were in our lives to whatever capacity. And in this case, it's obviously her ex-boyfriends. And this idea that she is still living with them. And in this reality, this is very magical realism that they're living within the same house as her and her new family, her husband and their two children. And the nuance of trying to navigate life with raising her children and having a relationship with her husband with all of these men still in tow, basically, because they all, of course, live there and they're all spending her husband's money. And yeah, I just love that exploration. I love how she's sort of personifying emotional and physical trauma from emotional and physical abuse from her previous relationship with Adam. And I love the dichotomy between Adam and Aaron as like the Adam is the one that tore her down, but Aaron was the salve, she calls him. And I'm sure we'll explore those relationships later. And I love the sort of the ending with at least with Aaron, where she drops him off at the airport and that's it. And it's just like a clean break for them at that point. But yeah, I mean, I could just go on because I love every aspect of the story, and I think it was such a genius way for her to explore this topic was to use magical realism and then like have these men present. But I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thank you, Joey. I love this story from the fact that it did feel Midwestern. It did feel super contemporary. I was thinking, it's like, oh, is this a modern author? I'm like, of course it's a modern author, but not in the way that we talk about people like Virginia Woolf, right? This is
Hmm.
a very contemporary, playful but deadly serious story in some ways. She's talking about some really deeply seated psychological trauma that this woman needs to unpack. And I really appreciated it. And as you said, the magical realism piece of, wait, you really have a third wing in your sprawling mansion in Los Angeles, which I'm like, could possibly happen because
Hmm.
stranger things have occurred, that all of these men are physically present. And your husband stays in the main house with you, and your kids and their au pairs, and they said each child had their own designated au pair,
Hmm.
lived in another wing of the building. So there were three wings of this house. And I'm like, yeah, really. And it's like, maybe. And so when you said it was magical realism, it was convincing enough for me to say, like, what is she really trying to do here? And one of my favorite scenes, Joey, is when she said they all pile into her Porsche, like
Hmm.
911, and she's like, it's like a clown car. I'm like, you know what a clown car is? It's full with all these bozos from your past that you need to get rid of, lady. So I think she just did some really interesting things with scene setting and again sort of tip of the iceberg. She said the only two characters out of all of the hundreds of, she said I had 100 boyfriends and she listed them alphabetically, which I thought was also like super fun. And she said there were only two that did not speak to her directly anymore, and it was Adam and Aaron. And I just thought that was also super, super interesting. It's like, what is she telling us about that? Your first love and the first person who abused you. Those were the two people who were not on speaking terms with her when we start the story.
Yeah, there's just so much of this story. I feel like we could literally dissect literally every single thing because it makes me think of I last week I said like two authors if they could write a story together, this is what the story would be. And I feel like if George Saunders and Virginia Woolf could write a story together, this is what it would have been. Because there are so many elements of like this surrealism and this magical realism from George Saunders where it's very much in the present, and there are some things that solidify that with the types of restaurant they go to, the museum, which is I'm sure older, but whatever. And then there are some sections or some sentences that are so Virginia Woolf to me, where we're getting not necessarily stream of consciousness, but that's sort of the vibe that she's I think she was kind of going for in some of it. In the very beginning, I just want to read the very opening paragraph because I think it sets we talk a lot about well, I talk a lot like the status quo and how authors establish that. So by status quo, I mean like what do we need to know about this story? What are the elements that we need to know in order to understand of the rest of what's going to happen. The author writes, the house in which we live has three wings. The west wing is where the husband and I live. The east wing is where the children and their attending au pairs live. And lastly, the largest but ugliest wing, extending behind the house like a gnarled, broken arm, is where my 100 ex-boyfriends live. We live in LA. So immediately where I was drawn in, like, what do you mean you live with your 100 boyfriends and why are you housing them? Because at this point, we don't know it's magical realism. Or, I mean, I guess you could guess, but I do think it's possible that someone can be that wealthy to be able to house that many people because they don't seem to be very big rooms. She can vacuum each room in 5 minutes, so probably not a huge area for each of them to live in. But immediately we understand that the husband is not going to be named in here, and we don't really we could guess that we could assume that she is going to name herself eventually, but she does not. And so it's interesting, and we talk about this a lot. And Jennifer, you usually bring this up that it's really important when certain characters are named and who is not named. So, like I said, the husband is not named. He's an everyman, is what she's kind of going for here, is that you can replace him with any guy from finance. So it's really interesting that she is only naming her boyfriends, and then of course she assigns the most importance to Aaron and Adam.
And Jerry, I appreciate it. I was going to definitely go there to the naming because she doesn't name herself. She doesn't name her children. She
Oh,
has
that's very true.
daughter and she has son, and she collectively refers to them in the narrative as kids, right? She's often yelling at her kids. And
Hmm.
husband in this story has a capital H. So again, it was like, kids don't have capital letters. Is this like God? Is this like an elevated person? It just was a very interesting thing. And Sherry, I got a little creeped out. I'm not gonna lie. I got a little creeped out
Hmm.
and it felt a little bit like Ernest Hemingway. And you're gonna be like, really? I'm like, yes.
No, oh my God, that's so funny because okay, go
Because the
ahead.
tip of the iceberg, right? And the dialogue. So we literally get, and I loved her playfulness of, you know, and she doesn't use quotation marks on anything. So you're just
Hmm.
like reading along. It's like, oh, I guess we're having a conversation now. Okay, here we're in our conversation. And the husband doesn't use words. All of his dialogue is in dollar signs. So I was like, wow, your husband really just is the cash machine. She
Hmm.
says, I treat him like a piece of furniture. If I'm lonely, I go, drape myself over him. That usually happens on Sunday night or Saturday night or Sunday morning. And the husband is like dollar sign, dollar sign, dollar sign. He has like literal sentences that are created this way. And when she goes to find him later in the story, she changes the dollar signs to cents. So for me, it's like, oh, it's my little talk. He's having a
Hmm.
little talk because he can't have his big talk. And I just thought that was so inventive and so beautiful because she asked him a question. It's like, so do you have to work this weekend? The answer was dollar sign. And it was just one symbol. So it's like, was that a yes? Was that a no? And the reason I say Hemingway, it's like, well, I'll just write this whole story myself. I'm just going to say
Hmm.
whatever she asked him. And that super poignant moment where she goes in to look for, she's cleaning out all the old rooms. They were empty. She's doing the vacuuming and she hears this ching, ching, ching. She's like, it sounds like change in your pocket. I have to find out where this is. And she finds husband, investment banker husband. And he's having a reckoning with her. She's like, of course I know your name. Like, don't be ridiculous. Of course I know your name. It's like, and yeah, no, I do not speak it. That's also kind of interesting. And it just felt like this reckoning that's like, do you care about me? Do you know me? Do you see me? Have you literally left me? Because she's like, oh, these rooms have been closed up for years. It's like, should she just leave her husband sort of emotionally abandoned in one of the little open spots that a boyfriend vacated so he could be in there? And it's just like, there's so much, Joey. There's just so much about that.
Yeah. I love that the author does not let the husband does have one line that he says, but it's like a flashback, I guess, when he wants to know how tall she is without her shoes on, but that's the only time that he actually speaks, and then immediately after that, it goes to back to dollar signs. So yeah, I just love that she let us create that dialogue for him. Like, what is he saying? What is the response? Because there are times where it's like almost a paragraph of dollar signs, and it's like an exclamation point and a question mark. So obviously he's upset about something, but we never know. He's not voiced, which I think is so common. That would be more common for like a woman, a character that's a woman in a story to be unvoiced. And so I really appreciate that she was like, "Oh no, it's the man who has no voice in this one." So go ahead, girl power. Okay, but you were talking about Ernest Hemingway, and I think it's so funny because I also saw a little bit of Hemingway in here. Not only because it's very sparse writing, it's economical writing, but obviously yes, that's a hallmark of Hemingway. But there's a conversation that she has with her daughter that reminded me of the hills like or hills like white elephants, not the hills, hills like white elephants. And I'll just read it. So she's talking to her daughter, and this is really the first time that we see the kids. So the author writes, at home, when the daughter spills raspberry juice on the carpet, the son chides, "This is why we can't have nice things." "No, that's not true," I tell them, looking at the daughter. "You can have everything." "Really?" she asks. "There's nothing you ever have to give up," I say, pretty sure this is the wrong thing to say to a 6-year-old, but saying it anyway. "You can have your cake and eat it too." "I can have my juice and spill it too?" Sure, good use of analogy. So to me, that was like that was reminiscent of the conversation that the girl, obviously she's also unnamed, and the American, another unnamed character, when they're having that conversation, obviously that story is about his wanting her to have an abortion, her looking out into the landscape and saying, like, I could have everything. Like, the world is my oyster, basically. And then to illustrate that, obviously, that's not possible. You can't have everything if someone wants you to take away something that you want, that you can't have it. So I was wondering, like, oh, I wonder if this is that kind of conversation that the mother is having with her daughter in this moment in this story, that she's sort of saying like, no, you can have everything. Don't let your brother, the boy in the room, tell you that you cannot and that you can have nice things. Like, and I don't think that she meant like you can also have an abortion. I don't know how that conversation would have went, but I saw that as her way of explaining like you can have everything and bodily autonomy. That's what I felt. Maybe it was because we just read Hills Like White Elephants and it's like influencing my reading.
I agree that that is influencing, I think, both of our perspectives on this. But when she said, I know I probably shouldn't be saying this to a 6-year-old, but I'm going to say it anyway. For me, this was setting up the daughter, not in a positive way that you just explained it to us, but more like she's going to be a brat. You are rich, you are affluent, your dad's got a lot of money, your mom's a stay-at-home person, you've got au pairs, you can have anything and every time. And if you spill something, oh, well, not a big deal because, we have white carpets. They'll be cleaned. They're fine. And I just thought that was just such an interesting thing to know in the moment that you may be harming your child's long-term perspective on the world by giving them sort of a false narrative of like, yes, you can have everything. You can have your cake and eat it too. And I love the playfulness because for me, you've been around me a long time, Joey. You know my goofy Midwestern sense of humor. I like puns. I like analogies. I'm always drawing these pictures for people, and they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. That she was saying, oh, good use of analogy. Like, I can be proud of my children for even if they're being a little snarky and a little entitled. Hey, they're still really smart. And I really liked that. But immediately after that, Joey, I wanted to take you there. She said, my ex-boyfriends are taking turns teaching my kids new things. They practice
Mhm.
piano, solve math exercises, demonstrate logic and rhetoric. And okay, do I believe that she had 100 physical men in her house doing this? No, I do not. I am also a person from the Midwest who likes to be hyperbolic in your speech. So when I said, Joey, I have had 100 boyfriends. Now, I did not have 100 as in the number after 99. I am saying more than one. There is an unnamed number of those boyfriends floating around in the past. And when I read that sentence, like my ex-boyfriends take turns teaching the kids new things, I thought exactly where you started us. All of her experiences she had with these men in various capacities throughout her life are now being reflected in the things that she's like, oh, let me tell you about history. Let me tell you about art. Let me tell you about all these things I've experienced through the guise of my imaginary boyfriends that are living here and are coming through. very, very clearly and very vividly in the here and now because the husband does not seem to be teaching them anything other than go to your wing of the house and leave your mother and I alone while we take our, and I love this, like the timeshare rented jet to
Mm-hmm.
dinner. And Joey, the thing that I really thought that you would, and I'm sure you're still getting there with me, talking about the flexibility of time, because I'm thinking about when they go to dinner, like they fly to this private place to go have dinner and they see a couple 30 years their senior. And she said, like, there's this gulf of 30 years between these two tables. And she is under the gaze of the older woman looking back at her, right? So we've got a lady in her 60s, maybe looking at a lady in her 30s, and she's like, feeling really uncomfortable because this lady just keeps staring at me. And so it's like it wasn't the male gaze, it was the female gaze of like, I am judging you. I am seeing myself reflected back. And the lady's like, oh, I just couldn't help but say, and for me, this was also a very Midwestern thing. I'm sorry, I know I'm a stranger, but I'm just going to come over and say, you guys are going to make such beautiful babies. She's like, I already did that in lockstep fashion, and I'm not going to say the words that she used because it was very provocative to me and not in a good way.
I was
The
about to read that.
You can read that, Joey, but for me, I was just like, wow, that was in lockstep. I did my duty. I had those two kids exactly. I have checked that box.
I do like the aspect of time, but I wasn't so certain until you started saying that because I was kind of suspected like, is this person that she's viewing, this woman that she can somehow see into the so directly into a window to be able to tell what she is exactly, does she's standing over the sink drinking and she can tell that the walls are still seafoam green that she had originally painted it. So obviously, I mean, but again, I was already thinking like, oh, it's magical realism, so she probably can't really see it, but in reality, she can't. But like in the story, she can. And it wasn't until like towards the end when we have that experience again, where she's looking out and she can see this other person again, that I was like, oh, maybe this is supposed to be her, and she's viewing herself at different times in her life. And then as you were saying, you were talking about the scene with the old woman or the older couple
Older,
older woman. Yeah. She's not old. If she's only like 60,
older.
that's not old. Yeah. In my head, they were like 80s or 90s, but it doesn't say that. So I was I was just kind of like that was my imagination. But anyway, is that then her and her husband and they're like reflecting on their own lives again? So I think that would be an interesting idea if that is what's going on, or it could have just been these people. Because to me, that was a very inappropriate comment to make, to say you will produce beautiful children. Like, ew, gross. What if you don't want kids? Like, what a weird thing to say. Or like, what if this woman has like had a history of miscarriages and that's like a super upsetting thing that you're just gonna randomly throw at her at dinner? Or like there's a fertility issue and she's going through IVF. Like there's so many things I'd be like, don't, that's really inappropriate to just like,
That is not stranger talk. You don't walk up to a stranger and
yeah,
say, let's talk about your gynecological history. Okay? No, let's
yeah.
not. But Joey, I will say, you and I are from different generations. We're from different parts of the country. We're different
Mm-hmm.
genders, obviously. And I know by knowing you and being educated about things that are inappropriate or possibly triggering for people that I have changed my behavior. But I can say 10 years ago, I would have looked at a couple in their 20s and was like, oh my God, I know it's none of my business, but you guys are beautiful. And I really, really hope you have some kids. And now I realize it's like, A, not your place. Maybe they're trying, maybe they've lost their children in a tragedy. Like you just don't know. So I think when people say that, they are only, and I'll speak for myself, I was only projecting what I wanted in my life and I wanted it to come true for them. And now I think in this story, because when we were talking about time, because Joy, I'm 100% sure that you are onto something with this. That first opening scene where she says she sees this woman standing in a room that she had painted herself years ago. She said, "It is 3 in the morning. It is 3 in the afternoon." So in one sentence, she tells us it's all times. It can't be 3 o'clock in the morning and it can't be 3 o'clock in the afternoon unless I just stand there all day, every day at that window, kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuck in this life. Because when she goes, because she made a big point about the people in the restaurant, the older people wearing like matching sweater vests, like they had their old person uniform on. She said when she opened the door and found her husband making that like change in your pocket sound, he was sitting there with a silver shock of hair, just like she said in the restaurant of that older couple, and he was in his sweater vest. And I was like, did we just time travel? Like, did what?
Yeah.
What is this? And
Yeah.
so, Joey, I think she is being very purposeful with time because at one point she says, she takes the first ex-boyfriend, he leaves for a good reason. And then she's like, well, now it's down to 99 boyfriends. And now it's down to 58 boyfriends. And now she just keeps dwindling them down. And it was really beautiful because in some ways it felt like the boyfriends themselves had been released to grow up and get on with their lives and not just be kind of trapped in this woman's imagination. But also she was freeing herself up to say
Mhm.
I've moved on. And I didn't like the math in this, Joey. I just have to say one thing. My little Puritan morality is coming out because she has two children. One is 7, one is 6. And one of the boyfriends, she said, we shouldn't be awkward with each other because we broke up like 7 years ago. I'm like, excuse me, miss. I think you need to check your math because that does not seem like an ethical conducting of how these children were brought into the world. So that was just a funny thing for me of like, of all the times that she could have picked for how long they had been broken up, why did she have that correspond with the age of her kids? That was weird to me. And then when the policeman came to the door and said, can we go to that scene, Joey? Can we go to
Mhm.
the scene? I'm going to read it because it was so, so infuriating. The policemen are at her door. She knows from her own personal lived experience with her abusing boyfriend that he is not a good guy. So they come in and they say, so are you saying that you're housing Adam Anderson Short? And that's the name of one of Short and Tall are the two policemen like Bert and Ernie. Short looks at me carefully. So what is your relation to him? He's my ex-boyfriend. He lived here for a while. I'm not sure if he still does. Tall pauses, licks his lips. Did he ever hit you? Yes. I say finally. When did this happen? At this point, I do the math, count back the years. Well, at least 10 years ago. Tall and Short look at each other before finally Short speaks up. That exceeds the statute of limitations. Then why did you make me tell you? I snap. An image flashes through my mind, a bloodied pillow entombed in a suitcase on the top shelf of the closet in my bedroom. And I think she's making such a beautiful statement of don't ask a question you're not prepared for the answer for. And the insensitivity of somebody who's like, oh, were you raped? Were you a victim of domestic violence? Did something traumatic happen to you? Yes, when? Oh, about a decade ago. I'm sorry, we can't help you. That was too long ago. And it's like, well, if you don't want to know, if you don't want to know my truth, don't ask me the question. And I think she was just so clear in putting that out there from the victim's perspective, right? If you don't want to know, don't ask.
I think that first of all, that unfortunately that happens to women in reality, where their experiences are invalidated immediately. It's like, well, then what? Then why did I say anything? So then women end up being quiet and suffering in silence because they're either not believed or it's just not taken seriously. Like it's par for the course. Like just suck it up. You're like, okay, great. That's great. That's the society we should live in. But anyway, so that's a heartbreaking part, obviously, when she is able to articulate these things or verbalize them. And maybe this is the first time that she's ever actually spoken about it, or it seems like because there's, the author puts that she sort of hesitates there, that this could be like her moment of actually bringing this to light, that she had this experience with Adam. And it's so sad that it's immediately says like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Not like a gentle way of saying like, well, unfortunately, like, there's nothing legally we can do, which is also bullshit. But like, validate her experience, make sure that she knows that like, oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that.
And Joey, what was so poignant and hurtful in reading this is that she said she kept the bloodied pillow for evidence. She said, not evidence for anyone else, but evidence for myself. And so when the cops, and we're having like this flashback of time of like what she was doing and why she did it, when the
Hmm.
police come to her door, they're like, this man is a serial domestic abuser, right? They say those words out loud to her and make it very clear that like there are multiple indications that he has done this to many women. And I think there's this little bit of shame or hesitancy for her to say, he did that to me 10 years ago and he's still doing it now. And I just think that was one of those interesting things. Some people talk about that. It's like if you don't report the crime that has been committed to you, not only do you not get your justice, that person is probably still free to roam about the countryside, continuing to do the bad things that were being done. So I thought that was so interesting. But she does get her moment, Joey. And this took me to a very dark place because as she's thinking about catching the bad guy, right, who had abused her in the past and was also doing this weird gaslighting thing of like, how do I know that the pain you're feeling is actually real pain? Like he just was doing a lot of verbal abuse of her to make her question her own reality. So she finally gets mad enough to be like, I want to chase this guy down and I want to chew on him and I want to consume him and I want to like punish him for this. And she's like, and Joey, do you know the phrase that I'm going to use where she says she wants to inseminate him with a million of babies and charge him with the raising of them? It's like, it's not just that I'm getting you pregnant, mister. You are also going to have to be responsible for all these lives. So clearly she
Hmm.
wasn't doing that, but it took me right back to the Octavia Butler story where she's like, hey, I am turning this narrative on its head. Men are now able to get impregnated and may die a horrific death if things don't go exactly perfectly right. So I was just really appreciating these subtle echoes of things that we had read in the past. And the story just really, really worked for me.
I think to me, this story, the core of this story is like how she is trying to heal from the trauma of her previous relationships. And I just want to read the section where she first talks about Adam and Aaron and the when we first learned that she there was physical abuse. So there are 100 ex-boyfriends, but two that really matter. Their names are similar, Aaron and Adam, Adam and Aaron. Aaron because I was in love, Adam because he beat me. I met Adam first, then Aaron. The wound, then the salve. Maybe you don't know that you're wounded until you receive the salve. The salve that makes everything come back. After you get beaten, you don't go out. Your face swells into a snout. You don't buy Tylenol. Oh my God, my New Jersey accent came out there. You don't buy Tylenol or groceries because you look like an animal loosened onto the streets. Animal control would mistake you for something else. Then I stayed indoors. I washed the blood off the walls and the sheets. The splattered pillow I kept as evidence, not for anyone else, just for myself. I just wanted to add that part since you were just talking about that. But I,
Joey, can you finish that paragraph? Because there's a
yeah.
super relevant point at the end of that.
Yeah, I listened to
Yep.
music, Cat Power, the covers record. I caught up on my reading. From primer to abuse, practiced abusers don't hit a woman in the face. The novice abuser is only pushed to it by extreme, uncontrollable conditions. I read it again, not conditions, emotions. I brushed up on philosophy. To live is to exist within time. To remember is to negate time. Very Borges.
Yeah, so I think she just laid it all out for us there. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this guy is an abuser. I have to learn more about this. And obviously, he is a person who is not controlling his emotions. And I think you know this about me, Joey. I have this weird tick where I misread things. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. You're like, those are not the words on the page. And so I felt so much identification with her of saying, oh, the novice abuser is only pushed to it by extreme uncontrollable conditions. I read it again. She put the word conditions in there, not emotions. And my brain often just decides to write its own narrative. So that felt really relatable to me. And her phrase, to live is to exist within time, to remember is to negate time. And her abuser boyfriend was always like, how did you even know this happened? Was this real? How do I know that you're real? How do I know your pain is real? So it's also this interesting thing of time and space. And if we're living in the moment, are you affronting the order of things by looking back at your past? But her past never left. Like she can't let go of her past. And if she spent, I'm like, and I'm thinking as she was cleaning out, she said, oh, I'm vacuuming all these rooms and like turning on the air conditioning and kind of freshening up. I was like, that felt like Voorhees story. All these little empty compartments in her brain were like, oh, Aaron's gone. Oh, Adam's gone. Carlos gone. And I was just like, oh, good for you, girl. Like, get them all out. But who's not gone? husband, and he is not too pleased to be sitting there waiting for you to notice. And I just thought that was really just a beautiful story. So if you said, is this a story about time? Yes. Is this a story about time travel? That might be a stretch, but I would love to stretch it there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, maybe like time traveling in your mind kind of thing. But yeah, I think that the author did such a great job of sort of explaining the feeling of being abused or being a victim of abuse, whether that's physical or emotional, sexual, whatever, and how it's very dehumanizing because she says like, oh, she would be an animal loosened on the street, and an animal control would pick her up thinking that she was like, a rabid animal or something.
Feral. Yeah.
Yeah, just like how intimate this like abuse is, which feels like a weird thing to say it's like an intimate experience, but it really is because you've trusted this person or people with your life basically, if you're living with them or whatever, and there should be mutual trust and respect that you're not going to abuse that other person. And to have that happen is I think she does such a beautiful job of explaining that experience. And it feels like this character, the protagonist, has PTSD, and that's like what she's experiencing. And maybe that's like where the narrative is coming from. But I was trying to think I've read this a few times now, but I was trying to think like, why is it important that she's wealthy? I mean, she's wealthy by osmosis, I guess, because her husband is wealthy. I don't think she works in this. I don't think like the money is coming from her because she lived in that little apartment. But I was trying to think like, what is the importance of this? Because obviously the author put it in there and she didn't do it just because she couldn't think of anything else. So I was like, oh, maybe it's a metaphor. Like it's supposed to be like emotional wealth, not monetary wealth. And that so often women in stories and in real life, IRL, have to take on the emotional burden of men, and they have to carry all of that weight, and so they're expected to pay out all of these things if we're gonna use this story as an analogy here. So that's what I was thinking. It's like, oh, she has to be emotionally wealthy in order to maintain all of these relationships that she has with 101 men, because her husband, of course, is still in the picture. And I just thought like, what an excellent way to illustrate that burden that women have to so often carry for men, and are expect like these men don't have 100 girlfriends each. There's not however, what's 100 times 100? I can't do math. Okay. What?
I'm going to say 1,000, Joey.
No, I think it's more than that. You know what? I think it's a million. Let me see.
Wait, 100 times 100 times 100. Now that's a different
Oh no,
story.
it's 10,000. Okay, whatever. It
Right.
doesn't matter. We're not mathematicians. We're reading books. Don't come here for math. That'd
We
be
do not
wrong.
come here for math.
Yeah,
That is
no,
correct.
reading. But yeah, okay, so there's not 10,000 women or whatever the number would be, but 10,000 women of their exes living here. So they're not carrying that emotional burden of the women that they've had in their lives, or however many relationships they had prior to that. It's only her. It's not her husband. It's not these men. And I think the best way that she illustrates that is when Aaron comes and says, I want to leave. And she says, go get Jeff because Jeff's the one that drives us around all the time. And he says, no, you need to do it. And so it's like, again, like she has to take this burden. Like she's already carrying all of them. She's financially supporting them through her husband, but whatever. And like interacting with them constantly and taking care of them. So I just like, again, I was like, oh my God, girl, this is the best way to explain all of these things. Like, and it's such a short story. Like, I put this in a Google Doc because I like to make notes, and it only came out to 8 pages. So it's so short, but like so impactful.
And Joey, there's a whole other part of this that you did not even talk about in that yet, is when the husband, who became her husband, right? It was like one of their first dates, and he was like, take off those high heels and I want to see how tall you are.
Hmm.
And it said she revealed how small she was. So that was also just an interesting phrase.
Hmm.
The reason in my mind why he did that, he was like, I am looking for breeding stock and I would like to have two beautiful children with you, a person. I would like you in our culture, being tall is one of the highly prized things for people. Depending on, some people like really small, some people like tall, but it is something our society rewards height. And I think he wanted to see how, what kind of material, genetic material am I working with? Not just how you look in your high heels. So for me, it was like she was being, in that moment for me, objectified of, are you going to fulfill the things that I need as the rich investment banker with my perfect life? I now need the perfect woman to just produce these kids. They said they did it in lockstep. It's like bam, bam. She got pregnant, like 2 kids in 2 years, did her duty. She says her kids are tall and graceful like track stars, and they have this halo of blonde hair. So it was just this like, just so many stereotypical markers of success in America of what do these prized children, what do these prized people, what do they look like? Who are they? What are they doing? And so, Joy, that was just another, for me, ugly twist on the American dream. Like, who has the power? Who is doing it? And I'm sure the husband's like, excuse me, but like she said, we bought 101, because it was her plus her 100 boyfriends, 101 tickets to the Getty Museum. And we also bought 101 things at the Gap or all these other places where they had gone. And I thought, now she's not really doing that, but I could also think that the husband was like, I don't think I want to support all these other men who have been in your life before me and don't seem to leave. And Joy, if I can be so bold to go back to the intimacy thing that you were talking about, I
Hmm.
want to read just what I thought was a lovely section of the story. So she said, it's Friday night. She is going out. She being that mythical girl that she sees in the mirror that she thinks is herself, but not really. She is putting on her shoes, her jacket. She gazes out the window, and for a brief, implausible moment, I could swear that she is looking at me. Then she switches off the light. So again, it's like insight, darkness, light, playing with that. But then we go immediately to that bad, bad, bad abuser boyfriend. This is when I see him standing behind a tree a few yards away. I see his body, not as big and tall as anyone would expect, but not lanky either. I see his face, still unshed of its slight baby fat, the light eyes, the dark hair, the mouth always ready to curdle into a smile, always eager to say that everything's going to be okay, always quick to promise that it'll never happen again. We are frozen, studying one another. He breathes in steady, cautious intervals. His fingers unfurl uneasily against the bark. I know his breath as if it were my own. I know his hands with their worn knuckles as if they were my own. So again, that intimacy of their connection, she's like, I know those hands and I know what those hands can do. And I thought that was just so telling. And then she's like chases him, says what she wants to do, and she says, his face changes when she yells stop. He starts running again, and that says everything. I charge after him, sprinting at the fastest speed I could muster, accelerating at a rate beyond comprehension. I don't know what I will do if I actually catch him. I can't hold him down. I can't arrest him. But I am close enough that I can see the goosebumps on the back of his arms. And it isn't until I am this close that I realize how much I want to catch him. I really, really want to catch him. I want to masticate him with my teeth. I want to barf on him and coat him in my stinging acids. I want to unleash a million babies inside of him and burden him with their upbringing. I was just like, that's some very clear pent up rage and aggression that she is willing to allow herself that moment of insight. She's like, I didn't know this about myself until I was close enough to see the goosebumps on the back of his arm. I don't think he was cold. I think he was scared that he is going to get caught and get beaten himself.
I really like the fact that the author put his description, Adam's description, his physical description, because he comes off very cherubic looking. He has a slight baby fat still. I'm assuming, yeah, I see his face still. Yeah, he still has a little round face, and he seems like he's not like a big person. He's not a big man. He's not the person that you would think is awaiting you in the shadows with malicious intent. He is just like a normal guy who's maybe a little bit shorter, is kind of, not chiseled in any way, and he's very disarming looking, but he's actually a huge piece of shit who's very
Indeed,
abusive.
he
Yeah.
is. Yes.
So I thought That was another way. I feel like this story is very validating to people who have, or maybe that have been abused, because it's, it's not, it doesn't have to be like this, like sort of from like a movie where it's everyone is cast in shadow constantly, and they're just like, the guy's like 6'7" and is like built like a truck or something. Like, he doesn't have to be looking like that. It could be anyone who can go through this experience. And the part where she's talking about how she wants to like rip him apart with her teeth and barf on him and unleash babies inside of him, like, she's like having a reckoning with this abuse. And that's when I thought, like, oh, is this PTSD? I'm not a psychologist, don't take that with a grain of salt what I'm saying. But yeah, I just think like this is a wonderful exploration of the healing process after a traumatic relationship. And at the very last lines are, "But I am close. I am so, so close." As if like, I can see that I can heal from this. I just need to get there. And maybe it's supposed to be like a very hopeful ending. That's what I walked away with, at least.
And Joey, I would definitely go there with you. And I just wanted to point out again what I loved about her humor, but it is so sharp and hurtful at times. So she's having that conversation with her husband in that anterior room, right? All the boyfriends are gone, but the husband is sitting there, and we just see the little dollar sign for his part of the dialogue. We don't know what it says. And she writes, "Of course I remember." And then she says, "I first met the husband on loweredexpectations.com. He was the first guy I met after creating a profile. Under favorite foods, I put tacos. Under favorite music, I put cat power. I put down all the taste qualifiers that were supposed to bridge the gap between myself and someone else. Under what I'm looking for, I put, I want to know someone for longer than a few years. I want to know what that feels like. I also want not to flee. By that, I mean I want constancy. I want to be constant." And it was interesting for me. Like, I love that loweredexpectations.com, right? She's had her 100 boyfriends. She's like,
Yeah.
okay, here's my
That's
last one. This is going to be
that's
great.
that's a
And I'm
George Saunders thing, I feel
right. And I'm
like.
going to be so generic. I like tacos and I like cat power, and I just want somebody who will not flee or make me want to flee. I'm like, whew, that is not a great thing. And then the next thing they say is on the first date, he's like, take your shoes off. I need to see how tall you are. So he was shopping like she was shopping. It's like, oh, you'll do. Put her in the cart, check her out. I'll
Hmm.
just take this one and start my life. And I just thought that was so very interesting that she was kind of erasing herself. She's like, I can be for anyone. I'll just not reveal anything about myself. I'll just be generic, and someone will be like, good enough. That really struck me. And being a Midwestern girl myself, there were some things that she said in there that just really, really hit home about somebody saying, hey, you want to go see something really weird? I'm like, of course I do. Get in the car. Like, let's go see this shopping mall that's actually a mosque that no longer, has the minuets, no longer broadcast anything, but the symbols are still there as bookends. And no matter what else goes in that shopping center, those physical markers remain. And it's like, oh, yeah, like the scars on her psyche, they may not be screaming out that she's been damaged, but they are right there, front and center. You cannot pretend they're not there. And she says, oh, yeah, we went out to this taqueria, and not with her husband, but with one of her, I think it was probably Aaron, the boy she really loved, or like
Hmm.
her first real love. It's like, oh, we went for tacos. And it was for the first time I ever had, and I always get the name of that Mexican pop wrong. So I always just call it the Mexican pop, but there is a flavor called tamarind and
Tamarind.
tamarind. And I was like, I remember the first time I had one of those. And it was just this very funny, relatable, how exotic to have something new when you're in the Midwest. And I know you New Yorkers are all going to be like, seriously, we had those when we were 4. I'm like, well, I had them when I was 35. So good for you. Anyway, I just thought it was
Yeah.
so relatable. So when I read her bio and said that she was originally from China, she was a one-child kid. And then her
Hmm.
parents were like, see you later. We're all going to move to America. And then we are going to expand our family. But she had a very clearly different experience moving to the Midwest and being other. So I think a lot of her things are about, oh, isn't it interesting these American generic kind of ways that we see the world, and from an outsider's point of view, they might be extra peculiar. And I just really appreciated that she felt like someone I could know because the growing up in the Midwest and that sensibility, that really rang true.
I had a different perspective on to go back to the loweredexpectations.com, which I thought was like so funny. But when she puts like under favorite foods, tacos and music, she put cat power, which I don't know if it's a real thing, but I'm gonna look it up and see if it is. I didn't feel like she was saying like I'll make myself generic to fit anybody. I think she was acknowledging that those things don't make up who you are as a person. The fact that you like tacos and cat power or listen to cat power doesn't mean anything about you. It's just like two things that you like. It doesn't tell you who you are as a person. It's not going to tell you, it's not going to communicate that to a stranger. And this vice versa. You're not going to be like, oh, you like, I don't know, roast beef. All right.
It's not a value signaling, right? I'm not
Yes,
telling you what
yes.
I value because I love tacos, but I happen to love tacos. There you go.
Yeah. And for under what she's looking for, and when she put, I want someone for longer than a few years and whatever, I thought like that part was so heartbreaking to me because to me that was a signal that this is somebody that has been abused and has come home and has been like, I don't know the person I live with, I don't know which version of them is going to be
Mhm.
there waiting for me. And that maybe that has happened like in her childhood. I don't know. We don't obviously see any of that. But even if it's just from Adam, obviously that had such a profound impact on her that she was like, I just want to know that I'm coming home to the same thing every day. Like, you don't have to be in the best mood, but I don't want one day you to be really affectionate and the next day you're beating the shit out of her because you want to see if people really feel things in the moment. I felt really bad for her and felt like, oh my God, that's so sad. Like you want something so simple that you have to like you're putting that out there. This should be common sense to everyone that you just want constancy. You want consistency when you're at home and your home life to be like a safe space for you. So that's heartbreaking that she felt like that's what she had to say. But good, also good for her to be like, listen, you can't offer that. Hit the bricks because I don't want it. I don't
Been
care
there,
that
done
my
that, not
yeah.
doing that. This is her final shot, right? She's hoping that she's going to meet the man that she marries, and she does. And it's such an interesting, I love that the author does not give us enough information. Again, it feels like a very Hemingway kind of thing. I don't know anything about this husband other than he's an investment banker, and he seems to be like, this is what I signed up for. She does not seem, as portrayed in the story, to be a font of emotional connection and support for him. She's like, I see him as a piece, literally, she writes, I see him as a piece of furniture. I treat him as a chair. And I thought, that is not exactly the utilitarian relationship I would like to have with another human being. Like, it was just so interesting. But for me, that said more about her, the unnamed narrator, star of the show. Maybe she just didn't have the emotional capacity or the desire to know anyone deeper because it didn't feel like she was really attached to those kids, right? She's like, well, they're my kids and I own them. They're like mine, but like the au pairs are handling them and I'm just kind of giving them some dodgy life advice, which I know is probably wrong, but it seemed like a clever thing to say in the moment, so I'm just going to say it.
Did feel kind of strange for her to question that as their mother. It's like, I mean, wouldn't you know? But to go back to the chair, I just want to read that section so that we can ground ourselves. The husband is a resting place. He is a chair. Sometimes I drape myself over him and I get the physical comfort of not being alone. I could feel it any time I want, mostly Saturday nights, mostly Sunday mornings. But the times when I need it most are the early evenings when I feel like I am dissolving. During this time, my ex-boyfriends scatter and the husband and I go somewhere for dinner and then they go on their timeshare plane, which is hilarious. Like, who has a timeshare plane? I don't know if that's a thing, but why would you want that? But anyway, I felt like after reading it through, because obviously we don't see the dating website thing yet, or maybe that's no, this is early in the story. So, okay, this is the first page of my page, so we definitely didn't know that yet. But anyway, I could see why that is a very comforting thing because she's like, I can rely on this guy. He is sturdy. He's sturdy like a chair.
He's
Okay.
not going
Yeah,
anywhere.
he's got his feet on the ground. And she doesn't have to feel insecure in that She doesn't know his reactions. She's going to know his reaction to things. She's going to know where he is. She's going to know all these. There's not so many variables that would have been in her relationship with Adam. And so I could see why that's a very comforting thing. And how their relationship is certainly transactional, especially because he only talks in dollar signs. Obviously, that I think that was the intention. I don't know that. I do think that there is a thing that she doesn't have this capacity to fully love her husband, or maybe that's not, maybe that was never her intention. We don't know everything about the relationship, so perhaps that's sort of the case where you were saying he was sort of like looking at her like, what do you got to offer genetically to my future children? Maybe that was enough for both of them to be like, I just want to come home to someone I know is going to be behaving themselves in the same consistent manner. And he was like, I just want to make cute kids. Like I just I just want to have, this is my legacy, is now my children. So if that is their thing, then that's great, but I can definitely see why, or I interpreted that very differently as her being like, yeah, he is my chair and I love that I get to just come over to him and drape myself over him. When she specifically says like, when I feel like I'm dissolving, I can I feel like I can relate to that, in that there are times in the day when I live alone, so I get, maybe I shouldn't put that out there, but no one knows where I live. You know I live in New Jersey and I live alone. Good luck.
With a
That
giant vicious dog.
Yes. No, my dog will bite first and then never ask questions. So I wouldn't do that. But anyway, where there's sort of like when you live alone, at least in my experience, where you are like, this is great. I love living alone. I can do whatever that whatever I want all day. Okay. Well, except for I have to work, whatever. And then there's times where you're like, huh. I kind of like wish there was someone around for me to talk to that can talk back and not like my dog. So, and I feel like again, because I think like maybe she's experiencing PTSD, and that's like when she's sort of like getting into the thick of that experience for her. Maybe there's something triggering about that time of day when maybe that was when Adam was more likely to abuse her, and that she can go to her husband and find that comfort and support. So, just perspectives, your perspective on that.
So, Joey, I felt very differently about the word dissolving. She was dissolving when she felt she didn't have access to those ideas about her boyfriend. Did she have an identity outside of each of the little contributions each of these men had left in her life and
Mm.
her psyche? And she's like, oh no, my rocks of my history that cement me as a human, like I know who I am because I had these experiences, those were dissolving. And I was like, I better go sit next to my husband because I like need to be grounded and I need to know myself. I'm evaporating. And I just thought that was just such a powerful thought of who are you outside of relationships? Is there a way to be a person outside of your past relationships? Is the point, as I'm learning in my adult life, is the point of growing up and becoming a person is that you can acknowledge the impact of the people in your past, but they do need to turn into ghosts. They do need to evaporate. They do need to leave you the freedom to operate in the life that you have actually chosen. And so it was just that interesting thing because one of the two, it was either the abuser or the boyfriend she really loved in the beginning, said, it's time for me to go. I've overstayed my welcome. And she's like, you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to overstay your welcome. Like, I want you guys overstaying your welcome. And he's like, no, it's time to go. And I just really thought that was like a beautiful psychological thing. It's like, when do you know when it's time to let someone really go?
Hmm.
And I thought it was beautiful that it's like, can you drive me? It's like, no, Jeff is going to do it. It's like, no, I kind of need you to see me go. And she's like, where are we going? It's like, I'll tell you once we're in the car. I'll give you turn by turn directions. So I also thought it felt like a very insightful thing of that boyfriend to be like, if I say, hey, Joey, I'm ready to leave you. Could you just take me to the airport? Because this is the last time you're ever going to see me. You'd be like, no, I'm not ready for that. But I'm like, well, let's just go for a drive. And I'll just tell you as we get there, like, wait, are we at the airport? I'm like, sure are. See you later. Bye.
That's my
Um,
gate. Bye.
exactly. So I just thought it was also like, and the reason I bring this out in this playful, fun way is like there were some serious, domestic abuse and finding
Mm.
out your own identity and like all of these things. child rearing, responsibility, consumerism, all of it. All of the things are there. But there's also some fun, playful elements where she is allowing us to have a little levity. And I just really did appreciate that.
I think that's a good point that she sort of needs these men to stick around because she doesn't really have too much of a personality in this story. We don't really get to know her on a super deep level. Like what do we know that she likes? I,
Tacos,
yeah, well, tacos and cat power, yeah, because she tells us that. But she does sort of lack,
like form. She's
yeah,
just not,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, she's sort of like incorporeal. Like she's not well defined in the story, and the thing that defines her is that she has 100 ex-boyfriends living with her. That's an interesting interpretation, is like again a very realistic experience when you are in a long-term relationship or whatever, however long your relationship is, that you have to be like, "Huh, who am I without this person? Like I know what we like to do together, um, but like, what do I like to do on a daily basis or like just whatever on my own? And having to like basically reintroduce yourself to yourself and be like, huh, I do like things. I like things. I don't need
Who
this
knew?
person. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this author just altogether did an amazing job. I would highly recommend this whole collection. I think we should read more from the collection soon, eventually. There's this Yeti story that she talks about like having sex with a Yeti, which sounds really weird, but it's really short and it's honestly really a beautiful story and it's very intimate.
And Joey, I looked at some other of her online stories. There was one in the New Yorker, there was one in the Atlantic magazine. I'm
Oh.
like, this woman is definitely a person who is in my orbit. So I am certain that you and I, together or separately, will be exploring more of her work because I think she is just a gem. And just pointing out, she's in her early 40s. So hopefully we have a whole long career of more things coming out from her. And it's just they just keep getting better and better. And Joey, for all of the aspiring writers out there, I'm just going to give you this one little tidbit. She was a fact checker at Playboy magazine for a couple of years, and she got
Hmm.
laid off because they were doing staff cuts. So she got a severance. And she's like, huh,
Oh,
I think
that's
I think I'm going to write a novel. That's what I'm going to do. So she took the money from her severance, and that is why that book was called Severance. It was kind of an homage to that. She thought she'd be able to just use her
hmm.
severance to like get through life, and it took her 4 years to write that novel, but she did it and it kind of launched her career. And I have another little factoid that came out that I read today about the MacArthur Genius Grants that the recipients receive no strings attached. You may do it for anything that supports your artistic endeavors. $800,000 cash. So she
Woof. I
said
wish I was a
that
genius.
was, I know, it's like, we're not that genius. We got the nice try award. And
Yeah,
unfortunately,
nice.
there's only a certificate and no financial remuneration there. But she
Mm.
said that that's life-changing money because it allowed her to continue to hone her craft. So even though she's in her 40s, she is aware of her extreme fortune to be able to have the time and space to create these beautiful stories for us. And I just was super, wow, I was super. I should probably get some adjectives. I was impressed by her willingness to say that out loud when asked directly and did not take that lightly.
Yeah, that's very a room of one's own of her. Virginia Woolf would be proud.
Just making her own path. Yes. So, Joey, I am really enjoying the exploration of authors that I have yet to encounter. So, next week we will be having Hemi Aguta's story, The Hollow. So, I look forward to talking to you about that then.